Joining us now on Practical 365, well, we've got a guest from Microsoft talking about AWS. Welcome to the show, Luberth. How are you?
All good here. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very excited to have this conversation today.
So you work with Greg Taylor, and you are somebody who's working quite closely with the team on AWS deprecation. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, actually, I chose Greg as my mentor a couple of years ago. It was supposed to be something good for me, and now I'm twice as busy as I was before. But I'm happy. Greg is awesome. First time I met him, I Googled his name, and I just got like Mr. Exchange back on the first result. And that told me everything I need to know.
So,
yeah,
Paul,
not many people have their own flat caricature that stands alongside Tony. Greg is one of the privileged few.
I once saw a picture that Greg posted of his garden where he had a cardboard cutout of Tony in his garden. And so he doesn't just go to work and think about Exchange stuff. He goes home and thinks about it as well.
I think he does.
So yeah, you probably picked the right person for sure. But AWS, it would feel like you've drawn the short straw, I suppose, in a way. Because Paul, what does it mean for you? What's if you haven't heard about this and you're listening, Paul, let us know what's going on.
Well, I mean, I'm sad. I feel like one of my favorite pets has been given a death sentence because when EWS was introduced with Exchange 2007, it was really revolutionary, right? It was this all-purpose API that you could use in lightweight clients. You didn't have to use MAPI. You didn't have to use any of the scripting APIs. And you could do what we would now call RESTful interactions with Exchange. And it was enormously powerful. And it's been baked into a lot of products from Microsoft, from third-party vendors. People use it in line of business applications and so on. But in saying that, also, it's fair to say that was designed in the 2004, 2005 timeframe, and the world's moved on. So I totally understand that it's time for it to be deprecated. But that raises a lot of questions, right? At any time a popular, well-used, broadly adopted API is planned for deprecation, then people naturally have questions about what does it mean to me, what's going to replace it, when am I going to know more, all those sorts of things. So,
and I suppose although it's fundamental in a lot of things that people use in migration products, you wouldn't start today by building, a SOAP API, XML. Doesn't seem like it should be the right thing to do. I wouldn't. I don't like the times when I've got to work out the potential overhead of an EWS request
right.
when I'm trying to work out migration times for like archive ingestion and trying to factor that overhead in. You think to yourself, well, there's got to be a better way, but maybe there will be, right? What's the big reason behind Microsoft planning this? What's the strategy going forward for what AWS gives us, or what will replace it feature to feature?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And obviously, I agree with you. It's the number one question that you need to ask yourself. And yeah, we have multiple answers, but I think if we concentrate on the top one reason, as you said, it would be security, right? I mean, you have way more experience with EWS than I do. And you only have one single scope that pretty much gives you access to all of the information EWS programmatically has access to. There is now granular scopes as we have in Microsoft Graph. And in general, it's crazy to think. It's very understandable, as Paul also said. It was a different point in time. Everything was on-prem. The whole setup was different. We were not just sending data back and forth outside our organization physically when data is traveling back and forth the cloud now. And with EWS, we pretty much have one single switch, right? There are other mechanisms, I know, but in general, it's just one on and off. Do I have access to whatever within the Exchange ecosystem or not? And I think that's the main reason. One of the things that Graph is doing and is evolving constantly. I'm pretty sure that people who work with Graph and keep on top of what's new, you see that we put some new scopes every now and then out there based on real world needs. Like calendar, for instance. Recently, the Read Basic was launched, and that was not offered initially, but then some people realized it was risky to get all of the potential details that you could get in an event, including attachments, for instance, right? And that's, I think, the main driver behind this decision. We can always talk about some other stuff, like as you mentioned, Steph, you would not use SOAP if you were designing something for the first time. But not only that, it's like resources, meaning developers, also change, right? And their preferences change. And I was a developer for 11 years. So being super open and blunt here, it is not appealing for you and your career and your progression to keep working with stuff that no one else is using, not only because it's boring, because of the lack of support. As a developer, the community, I think, is the best you can have, and you can use the best tool in your day-to-day work. So if you're doing and using what everyone else is using, you're getting help, but you're also making sure whatever new vulnerability or issue arises, everyone will go and take care of it and tackle it. If you use old legacy technology, that's not going to be the case, right? So that's what I
feel. I suppose part of that is the Exchange Web Services managed API, right? Because if you're writing your own client, then I suppose the responsibility is on you. But a developer today is going to expect to be able to run a command curl and post some data and get something back. And I know that there are obviously, I've got customers who have developed in this. I have in the past as well. We've probably got posts on the blog about how to use manage API in PowerShell scripts, but I wouldn't want to do it today. It would just seem.
Oh no!
I'd hate it. It would feel a little bit like when we had to install the CDO extras when you're installing a BlackBerry server, and that on a modern Exchange version. Back then, that seemed a bit wrong as well, because you're adding more things that can potentially bring a vulnerability onto the platform, aren't you? So I think I can agree with that.
And definitely the development experience, sorry that I interrupted you there, also from the DevX experience, precisely around the same point you're covering, if you go and see Microsoft Graph now and you see the SDKs that are being built by Microsoft and supported by Microsoft are also offered in multiple languages, right? So you can accommodate your team and the skills within your development group without having to force them to use, let's say, Java or C#, right? Which also makes a huge difference.
Yep. So you sort of led Microsoft led the announcement with the expected deprecation date, and so that's circled on the calendar in red. How do you see the process going between now and then? It's obviously that is some time away, and it's very tempting to say, "Oh yeah, it's years in the future; it'll be fine." But I know you guys must have more detailed, a more detailed vision for what people who are using EWS today should be doing between now and then. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. The first that we need to do is definitely to recognize, as many people expressed, that there are clear gaps between EWS and Microsoft Graph. In the blog post announcement, we mentioned a few of those gaps, like the access to in-place archive. I think public folders was part of the points in the blog post, but we have many more, right? So when you ask me about how do I envision this 3-year journey, my priority right now, leading this effort, is to get as many gaps as possible closed in the first half of this process, right? Because I know I understand, not only for final, individual developers, LOBs, but also for, especially for, ISPs and developers like you and other people listening to this. We do understand it takes a long time to pretty much rewrite your code, test it, ship it, and then the next process after that is getting your customer base migrating from the previous product to the new one. And we understand customers are most of the times reluctant to change the application they're using if the one running is working fine. They will be hesitant. So going back to your question, right now we are in not in a rush, but definitely concentrating all of our energy on, first of all, prioritizing these gaps based on usage, right? Based on what most people need out there. So we can pretty much define what's going to be the plan to release the new functionality. There will be new functionality on Graph for sure. We wouldn't ask people to migrate to Graph, and then we would kill EWS without filling these gaps. As you know, and with all of your experience, it would be unrealistic for me to say that we will close 100% of the gaps.
Oh, of course.
Right, but at least what people really need to move, that's going to be the priority. Again, one thing that I feel Greg and I agreed on when we started this journey makes a difference is that we have people from the customer and partner experience team running the deprecation. Part of our job and our background is working next to customers and partners. So we're really doing our best to take this perspective, this input into consideration and putting the plan together. This is definitely, I'm not trying to criticize this type of efforts when product people are running them, but definitely the view is different. If you only put your concentration, your energy, and your focus on the product, definitely the steps you define, the plan you put together to accomplish this will differ from having the customers first. And I really have to say that I understand the concerns from people that we have received from different feedback mechanisms. And that's what I wanted to reiterate and highlight, that definitely our priority to start is close as many gaps as possible and get ourselves in the product team's backlog as quick as possible.
You make a really good point, because one of the things that, it's not the first API transition that I've been through, Steve. I'm sure you've suffered through your share of them too. And I'm not only talking about Microsoft. This is a common pattern in the industry that somebody introduces an API or a facility for developers, and developers use it, and then it's time to change it to something else. So that, that basic pattern is pretty well established in the industry. And I really like that the team that is directly engaged with customers and partners is driving that, as opposed to the product team. And as you said, Luberth, that's not a criticism of the product team. As a product guy, you're absolutely right. I have a different focus when I'm thinking about what I'm going to do in the product. I have a different focus than my customer success or support teams do. And as a customer of this API, I'm glad that you guys are driving it, not necessarily the Graph team, because it's a little bit different perspective.
Yeah, when I was thinking of what feedback I've had from customers before as well, when they've looked prior to this announcement at moving applications they've got to use the Graph API, the biggest concern is this. You hear about parity when Microsoft release a new version of something in the cloud. Teams, an interesting one, of course. If you were to open Teams 2 versus Teams 1, for example, we record this podcast using the version 1 because it doesn't have some of the functionality. With EWS, it's bigger. It's applications that large organizations and some small ones have built maybe over several years, might not still have the skills for that person that built some of that application or don't want to rewrite it from scratch, or they've already looked at this and found it was missing particular things and had assurances from Microsoft, don't worry, everything's going to be fine, we're not getting rid of anything overnight. And it's that point where my concern was going to be, well, where's the support for customers, particularly the larger enterprises who have built applications in-house, right? Because they're some of the key people who will be stuck with nothing to go to.
No, I totally get you. I know we have just published one entry in this migration guide series that we announced and made public. So if you go and search for this AWS to Microsoft Graph migration guide series, you'll find this in the Exchange Tech community. We will eventually also add entries in the M365 developer blog platform. But the idea behind this series, we're already working on the content and the material, is precisely to offer these tools and help to people out there. So initially, since right now we're only talking about, this is the announcement, we are working on this, it's going to be 3 years, we are prioritizing the gaps. The first post is just a simple PowerShell script to help admins identify what applications in their tenants are using EWS permissions, right? The team is working continuously on making the script better. Initially, it was only to identify apps. Now we're thinking on also querying the activity log, so we can filter those applications that are active. So we can tell you as an admin, this is the list of active applications still using EWS. So you get at least an idea of whether this actually affects your organization or not. The same way, using the same logic, the idea for us is to also offer code samples using our SDKs eventually in the future, comparing and showing how to, for instance, pull your events from a certain calendar in AWS, show the old way of doing this with the Legacy API, and then give you the code you could pretty much copy-paste, right? And then use in your application. So the whole purpose of this migration series is to offer this support you were mentioning outside of the regular mechanisms that Microsoft normally offers, like through support or the documentation on Learn. We put this together, which is a nice initiative. To be honest, I like it a lot because the people in the V team behind this include support engineers who've been working with Exchange for more than 15 years. And the knowledge they have is just insane. I feel super good when I go and I meet them, and we started creating a backlog of topics and examples we would like to include in this migration series, and it's unbelievable. Again, aligned to the same spirit, we're trying to put as number one priority in this deprecation, which is being customer obsessed, right? Having the customer support developers being part of this migration series, I think is one of the best ways to actually understand on the day-to-day the pain that people and customers are facing out there in trying to migrate to Microsoft Graph.
I imagine you must have a lot of telemetry about what people are doing with EWS and where they're using it and what the functional areas are that you're going to be able to use to sort of guide what your migration scenarios look like.
Totally, and you're right. This analysis and this telemetry it is very important, and it guides the prioritization of these backlogs that we were mentioning before. And it's super interesting. I obviously cannot share specific names with you, unfortunately, but I can definitely share with you and your audience an idea of who is using EWS and why, right? It's very interesting that the number one scenario is mail clients, right? which makes a lot of sense because part of the premises is like you should be able to do everything Outlook does with your own implementation, right? So different mail clients, they account for probably around 50 to 60% of the traffic, the external traffic we get in EWS, right? Again, I think that one it was an easy guess. Behind that, I'm going to ask you to guess, what do you think is the next big business scenario after mail clients?
And is this user or things that people do? Because there's user apps, or is it migration type things?
What's your guess, Paul?
I'm going to guess calendaring. And the reason I say that is I think every single enterprise line of business app that I've ever seen or worked on with EWS involved calendar management, calendar integration, scheduling, field service teams, that kind of thing. So that would be my guess.
The calendar is behind the list.
I was going to say contacts.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because given the amount of traffic we get from backup, archiving, and migration solutions, and since these solutions pretty much like they go and touch every single Exchange object, there is not such a huge difference between like event objects or contacts or even mail. Again, if you remove the mail clients out of the equation, the distribution of the remaining traffic across Exchange objects is not that different, right, between one and the other. And if we go back to the type of products that are doing that are using EWS heavily, we have backup solutions, we have archiving solutions, migration as well. And then behind them in the list, we have like this type of security and compliance, e-discovery type of products, right? Between those 6 categories, let's say, I think we're talking about maybe, depending on the month, obviously, between 80, 85, and 90% of the EWS external traffic. And then we have, scheduling applications, as Paul said, and some other, probably not so clear in terms of the type of the business domain. We have a set of different applications, very diverse set of applications. So, but it's pretty interesting. I mean, it was interesting for me. Also, I have to admit, this definitely plays a huge role in the prioritization process. If we know that mail clients need to be 100% independent from EWS and run on Graph, so they can actually complete this full process, we need to put a lot of energy on giving them what they need, right? I've seen many things mentioned by people in the different blogs and feedback mechanisms, and unfortunately, many of them are actually needed by these mail clients. Like, I don't know, for instance, there is no way to expand a distribution list in Graph. So this is something that's part of our list, and we're working to prioritize this and talk to the product team to see how we can implement this on Graph. But the same way, we're also making a big effort to get new functionality out there that can be used by backup vendors, migration companies, archiving solutions, because we can see now in the telemetry how important it is EWS for their business, and we don't want to break their business, right, and affect our common clients, customers.
So with EWS, there was always some gaps though when it came to mail clients, such as global address lists, in particular. But I suppose the biggest challenge that I can think of is whenever I've come across the type of applications that you mentioned, where it's some sort of a scheduling application, the organization will have bought something and it runs inefficiently trawling every mailbox over and over again in a loop, and on-premises probably caused them some sort of performance issues, right? And that vendor, well, hopefully they won't bust because they've made some shoddy application that has just caused pain, and probably, you know, if they've got 1,000 customers, it's probably cost Microsoft, you know, megawatt ton of energy over over the last 10 years, just through their inefficiencies, right? So they're never going to fix that. But you get those customers who rely on it. Not the enterprise customers, or not the self-built applications. But with migrations before, we've had this where the vendor doesn't even exist anymore, but it's out of support, or it's some sort of product that was the only thing there that they could have. When we're talking about other migrations like moving to Azure Active Directory, there's all that sort of stuff as well. You know, the £1 million thing in the corner that controls the big thing in the factory, and the same sort of applies to some of these applications where they bought this, and to replace it might cost a few £1 million, or might cost at least a few £100,000 to buy a new thing. I think that's my concern for those customers who don't have the skills internally to replace it or build a replacement, and the vendor is either not going to do this or might not even be around anymore, but the application would have continued to work otherwise. You know, it might not have any security issues or anything like that, but there was no pressing business need to do it. But this is driving it. You know the reasons why, but I know you can't give an answer to that. But that's probably going to be a large number of customers who are going to be in that sort of situation, and they don't have a CXP, they don't have a contact apart from the support they'll get if they phone Microsoft, or replying to blog posts where you've given these guides. So, you know, is that something that's been on your mind? You know, that swathe of usually, you know, one or two people at a company, they're the IT manager. This is another problem on their list that is probably going to not give them sleepless nights, but it's going to concern them over the next year.
That's a very good point. And to be, again, blunt and honest, I would say partially, not 100% as you explain it. And let me elaborate on that. I think something very positive that we're doing on this deprecation is we're using the experience from the basic auth deprecation that Greg ran. And I know he's been to this show before to talk about, you know, how he ran that. He actually put together this type of, let's say, a one-on-one guide for kitting products that I'm keeping close to my heart, to be honest. Right, it's very customer oriented. It accommodates for this type of, let's say, exceptions, right? But now, again, going back to me being 100% honest, I haven't considered specific scenarios like the one you mentioned where the vendor might not be already in the market. And we go to the customer, to a specific tenant, and we tell them, yeah, you're using this specific application, so many calls per month. We're killing this API in 3 years from now. We need to talk to your vendor and make them upgrade your application. If that vendor doesn't exist, it's a different type of problem, right? That I have not yet planned for it. And actually, I would like to ask you too, in your experience,
is it your problem,
with
though?
preview migrations, it's a good question as well.
Because if a vendor, I mean, it happens a reason on that, or the vendor's unhelpful is the usual case, right? And with the basic auth, it's the same sort of a problem. But yeah, obviously, if a vendor has run out of business, then that is a reason to replace the application, right? Because what if it has an issue and your data is corrupted or something? There's all sorts of other reasons for that. But the unhelpful vendor perhaps is maybe the main one. So I wouldn't expect dealing with an application vendor where they went out of business 6 years ago and the customer just carried on using it. That's kind of on them in that scenario. But it's you know what people are like. You know, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Or sometimes I've had customers where the IT team is quite new. They I think one of them was on about a piece of software. It was called something like Wizard or something. We didn't even know what Wizard was. We just heard the name, and they were sort of left to find and discover all the different applications in the environment. So, reporting on to customers what this thing is, then that's the unintentional, unsupported application. You might well be doing them a favor.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's a very good. It's a very good thing for me to think on, because again, it might not be my problem, but we might help people. Like for instance, just thinking on it for a few seconds, we're making good progress on the M365 certification program, right? And all of these apps getting certified, and the benefits behind that, which is not my program, so I cannot talk extensively about this. But now that you mentioned this, I can immediately think using this database of applications on vendors, let's say, that are certified, and then potentially offering this visibility on this catalog for people looking for a solution. But yeah, I'll definitely need to put some more thoughts on that. So thank you for that point. Very valuable.
Well, thank you for joining us as well, because it's something that we're going to have you back on the show. Yeah, I'm not putting you on the spot. We did discuss this over email before, because it is a long and winding road, I'm sure. And when there's more big news and announcements from Microsoft around this, then we're definitely having you back on so we can get into some of the detail on those as well, because there's so many more questions we've got. But you need to make sure that if you're listening, this is something that you need to be concerned about and doing something about. 3 years isn't a long time, For most of us, it doesn't seem that long ago since COVID came and went. It's like 2019 doesn't seem a long time ago. 2007 doesn't seem long ago when we talked about EWS coming out. Right. 3 years is no time, to sort of deal with these when you're doing all sorts of other key projects, in the business. So. We always say this, and then there's always people who straggle along at the end, though, isn't there?
Yeah, it's always the same. But I agree with you. I hope I can. More than happy to come back once we have news. And yeah, it was 2018 when we first announced that we were not investing more on EWS. So it's been 5 years already since we motivated people to start using Graph. So yeah.
Yeah, and to his credit, Tony has been encouraging people writers on Practical 365, MVPs and so on, to write about this on a regular basis as well. The writing has definitely been on the wall.
It absolutely has.
Yes. Just have to make it bigger. So we're going to have the spray paint this time rather than a little post-it note.
So just a reminder to everybody listening at home, Steve does not actually want you to go out and spray paint anything anywhere. Just feel like that needs to be said.
Does it?
Yes.
I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy if someone wants to write on the side of their own house. EWS is going. I will laugh at you, not with you though. But thank you, Luberth, for joining us on the show.
Yes.
Say hi to Greg for us as well.
Thank you for the invitation.
And we will speak soon. Thank you.